CBS News, 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
Tonight, snow, ice, freezing rain, and bone-chilling cold. Millions are coping with deadly winter storms and the travel fallout on the roads and airports. Then, how New Hampshire's independent voters will be a test for the GOP candidates on the CBS Evening News.
It would be so nice if we could come together and straighten out the world and straighten out the problems and straighten out all of the death and destruction that we're witnessing.
In spite of all of that they threw at us, everyone against us, we've got our ticket punched out of Iowa.
I can safely say tonight, Iowa made this Republican primary a two-person race. I will be back in the great state of New Hampshire. And the question before Americans is now very clear. Do you want more of the same?
Hello, I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington, and welcome to a special hour-long election edition of America Decides. Lots of news and results to get to from Iowa and from New Hampshire. Well, after months of campaigning, the first presidential contest is now in the books, and the Republican presidential candidates are looking towards New Hampshire after former President Donald Trump's record-breaking victory in Iowa last night. The GOP frontrunner won 51% of the vote in Iowa's GOP caucuses, beating his nearest rival by 30 points. Now, just under 15% of the Hawkeye state's registered Republicans braved the frigid weather there to participate. They are hardy souls. And today, Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley are all visiting the next state up, New Hampshire, where polls show a much tighter race. We're going to get to all of that now with Caitlin Huey-Burns and Finn Gomez. Caitlin is CBS News political correspondent. She's in New Hampshire. And Finn is CBS News political director. He is in Des Moines, Iowa, still standing after a lot of very long days. That's impressive indeed. All right, welcome to both of you. Caitlin, I want to start with you because you are there in New Hampshire. Set the stage for us exactly 1 week before primary day there. Where do these three candidates stand in the Granite State? And is there a chance that the outcome there could be different than it was in Iowa?
Hey, Nancy, great to be with you. Well, we're waiting for Donald Trump to land here in New Hampshire. Fresh off that win in Iowa, he actually headed to New York, where he's facing defamation charges from writer E. Jean Carroll. He wanted to appear there in court, and then he's coming back here to campaign in New Hampshire, where he's going to spend nearly every day this week campaigning here, which that kind of split screen shows you a lot about this campaign. We saw in Iowa that supporters were endeared to him throughout these court challenges. Voters I've been talking to here behind me who are supporting him agree with that. Here in New Hampshire, it was a place that gave Donald Trump a boost in 2016. Remember, he lost Iowa, came to New Hampshire, was catapulted through the primary, and the rest is history. Nikki Haley is looking at New Hampshire for kind of a similar redemption story after coming third in Iowa. She believes the electorate here is more favorable to her. She's been campaigning pretty heavily here, spending a lot of money on air. A super PAC supporting her has been hitting the ground. We followed them earlier this week as they knocked on doors. She thinks the she thinks the independent voters here, the undeclared voters, who make up about 40% of the electorate, can play an outsized role in favor of her. And meanwhile, DeSantis, he actually headed to South Carolina today to try to blunt Haley's momentum after coming in a distant second place to Donald Trump in Iowa.
And I notice you've got a really packed house behind you there in New Hampshire, so clearly a lot of people there looking forward to hearing what Donald Trump has to say. Finn, the demographics in New Hampshire are so different from Iowa. The size of the electorate is very different. Only 110,000 people caucused in Iowa last night. We could see double that number voting in New Hampshire next week. What does all of that mean for the frontrunner, Donald Trump?
What it means is, like as CHP just said, it really is about him being more aggressive. I talked to some of his senior advisors who say that he intends to be more aggressive towards Nikki Haley, who is close to him in some recent polling data that we saw within striking distance, about 7 points away in that CNN poll that we saw just a little while ago. We do expect, as CHP said, more of an independent voter participation. There's about 80,000 more independent voters or undeclared voters than registered Republicans in New Hampshire. So she's really making a play for them, and they really can have that outsized role that Caitlin was talking about. And that is really where the secret sauce is. Who can garner that independent voter in about a week from now?
And Caitlin, it's because of those independent voters in New Hampshire that Nikki Haley is already calling this a two-person race, even though she came in third in Iowa. You actually had a chance to speak with her today about her strategy in New Hampshire. Let's take a listen to that.
So you're coming off Iowa. Yes. What makes New Hampshire different kind of territory for you?
You know, Iowa was great. They were hardworking, patriotic, God-fearing people. And then you come to New Hampshire, and what I love about New Hampshire is they wear their feelings on their sleeves. They do their homework. They know, but they will tell you exactly what they think. And I love that energy. It's great energy. We've been here for 11 months. We've done 75-plus town halls, answering every question, shaking every hand. And so we're going to continue all this week. We're not stopping until the last second before the election.
You've described this as a two-person race between yourself and Donald Trump. Does that mean you need to take the case more aggressively to Donald Trump?
Well, I think before there were 14 candidates, and so now we've gotten it down to where there's only 2 serious candidates playing in New Hampshire. And so, yes, it's about the differences between Trump and with me. And I'll tell you, look, we don't want 2 80-year-olds to be our options. More than that, we want to look at the fact that 75% of Americans don't want to see a Biden-Trump rematch. You have to look at the fact that the majority of Americans are not happy with either one of them. And they both put us $1 trillion in debt that our kids will never forgive us for. So let's go forward with a new generational leader. And that's what Granite Staters want. They want to move forward. They don't want to deal with 2 presidential options that are dealing with investigations and grievances. They want somebody who's going to be about results and no drama, and that's what I'm going to give to them.
So, Caitlin, she's making this generational argument there, saying it's time to turn the page. But then today she announces that she is not going to participate in debates in New Hampshire or anywhere else unless Trump starts showing up. So what's the strategy there? Because typically when you're a runner-up or you're in third place, you want to debate because you want that attention, right?
Yeah, Nancy, it's an interesting point because she was supposed to debate Ron DeSantis here in New Hampshire. And I asked her, should DeSantis drop out? And she said, look, I'm only seeing this as me against Donald Trump, and DeSantis is polling low in the polls here. And she wants to just have this direct debate with Trump. If you think about it, Trump's strategy of skipping these debates has proved to be beneficial for him. He hasn't suffered. In fact, as we saw in Iowa last night, he had a resounding victory, widespread support among Republican caucus goers there. So he, was able to not debate, and that actually worked for his advantage. He's a very unique candidate, however. We know that about him, and we know that the rules kind of go by the wayside in terms of kind of political history when it comes to Donald Trump. Her thinking is that she doesn't want to waste her time with DeSantis and wants to make clear that she is taking on Donald Trump. Now, I asked her, as you heard, does that mean that you are going to be more aggressive towards the former president? Because we've seen them, discuss some policy differences, discuss some rhetorical differences, but his challengers haven't really directly attacked him. And so I'm waiting to see whether those kinds of attacks escalate. She is on air here in New Hampshire now with an ad speaking to exactly what she just mentioned there, hoping to turn the page from both Trump and Biden. Trump's support here is very strong. He's leading in all the polls, but she believes that she can be within striking distance because when you look at the polls, if you take Chris Christie out of the picture, they're hoping to absorb his support and come close to Trump.
And I did notice today that she was given a couple of opportunities to go after Trump directly. She was asked, for example, about accusations of sexual abuse, and she totally sidestepped them. Interestingly, both of you, while we've been sitting here talking, some news in our inboxes, ABC is canceling its debate that was supposed to feature at least Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. But because Haley now says that she's not going to debate, obviously Donald Trump is not going to debate. That debate in New Hampshire is now canceled, which will probably be a disappointment to some New Hampshire voters. Finn, I want to play a little bit of what each of these three candidates had to say about the outcome in Iowa when they were at their parties last night, and a little bit more about what they're thinking about where things go from here. Take a listen.
I really think this is time now for everybody, our country, to come together. We want to come together. Whether it's Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative, it would be so nice if we could come together.
They threw everything but the kitchen sink at me during this process. They've spent almost $50 million against me.
I can safely say tonight, Iowa made this Republican primary a two-person race.
So, Finn, how do you anticipate DeSantis and Haley will treat Trump in New Hampshire? Because you would think that going after him there would play well with independent voters, probably wouldn't have in Iowa. And DeSantis challenged him a little more directly at the end of the Iowa race. What do you see going forward in New Hampshire?
I think that Nikki Haley, and I spoke to some people who are close to her campaign, who say that she does have to get more aggressive, to expect her to get more aggressive. She has the support and endorsement of a very popular governor with Chris Sununu, who is known to have quite the sort of a firebrand touch, if you will, with his rhetoric. He's known to throw those verbal grenades. And I think you have to, in this live free or die state, and you do have more of an appetite there, not only with independents, but they have this contrarian view in the Granite State that's a little bit different here in Iowa than Iowa. Nikki Haley got some criticism for saying that New Hampshire corrects the vote of Iowa, but historically, you do see that. You do see that contrast. And so there's that expectation that she has to really jump into that lane of the anti-Trump lane that exists and exists very strongly, much more so than here in Iowa. So she really has to do that. For DeSantis, yes, he talked about getting his ticket punched, that he got a ticket out of Iowa, and he did. He went to South Carolina, to Nikki Haley's home state, in an effort to tweak her, and then to New Hampshire. But really, he got his ticket punched. He got his ticket out. But where does that ticket go, Nancy? He really doesn't have a path. And I spoke to a lot of top Republicans who tell me that they don't really see a path for him. He doesn't really have the ground game that he had here. He doesn't really have the support that he has here in New Hampshire. He's polling in 4th and 5th place, even with Ramaswamy out, even with others out. I mean, the support for those candidates doesn't really convert to DeSantis supporters, and nor does it in South Carolina. Nikki Haley is really trying to make this a two-person race. You said that, you talked about that, and that is really the strategy that I think you're going to see here. But for Ron DeSantis, Nancy, I think there's a big question mark about where his path leads him and where he sees that path.
Right. And of course, he continues to be dogged by questions about whether he has enough money to keep going, and if so, for how long. Finn Gomez in Iowa, Caitlin Huey-Burns in New Hampshire, thank you both so much tonight. Former President Donald Trump was in a courtroom today after winning the Iowa caucuses. We'll explain why. You're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really happened.
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response? You want me to just keep going?
What's wrong with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
Why?
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
Human remains found this week.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
How can we become our best selves? That may be more about character than talent.
The ultimate mark of your potential is how far you've climbed, not how high you've gone.
Realizing your true potential with Adam Grant as we go person to person.
Well, just 12 hours after he won the Iowa caucuses, former President Donald Trump was in court for the start of his second defamation trial in New York City. E. Jean Carroll is seeking $10 million for reputational harm related to comments Trump made in 2019. CBS News campaign reporter Katrina Kaufman joins us now. She is also an attorney, so she's the perfect person to talk about all of this with. So, Katrina, walk us through what happened in the courtroom today.
So the day began with jury selection. Trump and E. Jean Carroll were both in the courtroom for that. So they were really going through the jurors and assessing them for the trial. One thing that's interesting about this jury is that it's an anonymous jury. So each of the jurors have numbers. They're not supposed to disclose their names. The judge encouraged them to give each other fake names, actually. And this is usually done in cartel cases. And also they're being brought in and out of the the courthouse underground from undisclosed locations. So there's a lot of secrecy surrounding these jurors. Ultimately, they chose 7 men and 2 women for the jury, and someone was calling it the UN of juries because there's a bunch of international people on it as well, a German, a Spanish man, and an Irish man.
Wow, that's really interesting. So explain what's at stake for Trump in this case and how this trial is different from his first defamation trial.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of confusion around this. Basically, this trial, it's all about damages. Trump, in the last trial, was already found liable for sexual abuse. He was already found liable for defamation. So the jurors are supposed to take those as facts. Now they're trying to determine, was Carroll harmed? How much should Trump compensate her for that harm? And then also, how much should he pay to make sure that he stops doing this because, as Carroll's lawyer pointed out, even to this day, he's still posting defamatory posts about her. So it became clear during the opening arguments, which also happened today, that Carroll's lawyers are looking for a significant payment of damages in this case.
And of course, this all stems from an incident back in the 1980s where E. Jean Carroll says that the former president actually cornered her in a dressing room and raped her. Katrina, I'm wondering if you can explain, former President Trump doesn't have to be in the courtroom. He wasn't there for the first trial. He did choose to be there today. So what was it like? What was the level of tension in that courtroom? And do we expect that he'll actually testify in this case?
That's a great question. So Trump was sitting a couple rows behind E. Jean Carroll. I noticed that she never turned around to look towards him the whole time. He was in there for the first half of the day during jury selection. And they had said initially that he was going to testify in the trial. Now it's a little unclear. There have been a lot of restrictions put on his testimony should he decide to do so. The judge is allowing him to testify Monday if he wants. Trump was trying to get this trial postponed because of his mother-in-law's funeral on Thursday, and even today they were still trying to push for that postponement, and the judge was saying, you know, I'm not preventing Trump from going to the funeral, and his lawyer said, no, but you're preventing him from being here. So it's, you know, I think we're really going to have to see if he decides to take the stand, but I was told that Carroll is going to testify tomorrow.
Interesting that he chose to be there today, and makes you wonder how much time he's planning to spend in that trial in the coming weeks. Katrina Kaufman, thanks so much.
Thank you, Nancy.
Next up, we're digging into the election results with CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. What did we learn from caucus goers last night, and what does it mean for New Hampshire? You're streaming America Decides.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's a country music legend, philanthropist, fashion icon, and now rock star.
I think there's a lot to be said about being comfortable with who you are.
Find out what's next for Dolly Parton when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That Desired Farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happierness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows
We need to step up and help them.
and a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. All three Republican candidates on the campaign trail are claiming that polling is on their side. Take a listen.
We have better poll numbers now than we've ever had.
In every one of those head-to-head polls against Biden, I defeat Biden by double digits.
To win the Republican nomination, you've got to appeal to core Republicans and conservative voters, and she just does not. I mean, when 43% of her support in a poll said they would vote for Biden in the general election.
So which one of them is right? Let's go to the source. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. He joins us now. Hi, Anthony. How you doing?
Hey there, Nancy. I am well. I love it when I hear people talking about polls.
I know, because that is your specialty and you are the expert. So let's dive into the results from last night. Donald Trump, of course, won all but one county in Iowa. It was a blowout. You've now had about 24 hours to dig into the results. What is standing out to you?
So here is a picture. This is the map. All the counties but one, as you said, and all but for one vote in Johnson here. Look, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, there's two for this, which is big win. And you don't get to a big win, Nancy, without convincing voters not just to vote for you, but of your positions. And take a look at this. People who not just want a candidate who fought for them, these are groups that supported Donald Trump, but this one really stood out to me, that think Joe Biden didn't win legitimately in 2020, which 2/3 of this electorate did. That tells you again the fact that these voters have bought the narrative, that they feel like something was taken away from them and their candidate. And also this, Nancy, that so many said that they were part of the MAGA movement and then, perhaps not surprisingly, voted for Donald Trump. And it's that MAGA base that's been undergirding his support and that was so important again. And this time, it's not just a poll. This time, it's actual voting that's come out and shown support for him, Nancy.
And in that voting, Anthony, he won with just about every key demographic in Iowa: men, women, young, old, college educated, non-college educated. And what I thought was so fascinating was the way you broke it down so you can see just how much his standing has improved in Iowa with some key groups since 2016, his first caucus. Walk us through that and what that means for Trump going forward.
So here's a chart illustrating exactly what you're talking about. Look at these jumps from voters, among voters with no college degree. I'm going to come back to this because it's so important in a minute. Very conservative. He picked up a lot of the 2016 Ted Cruz vote, those white evangelicals that were so important. But then the economy voters, and this is important, they thought the economy is the most important because in all our polling, Donald Trump kind of spans portions of the party. For folks who care about the economy, for folks who want a tax cut, they're for Donald Trump, but also more of these folks who feel like they're part of a movement, feel like they're part of the MAGA movement, who feel like Joe Biden didn't win. They're all in these groups as well, especially the no college degree voters. And that's going to be important. I'll show you the map in a second, because it's the no college degree voters who are even more likely, by about 2 or 3 times, to say they buy Trump's narrative that Joe Biden didn't win, Nancy.
So let's look ahead now to New Hampshire then. You've got Nikki Haley saying this is a 2-person race.
Yeah.
Who actually has the polling edge there?
So I'm going to show you 2 quick things. One is these counties in yellow are the ones where Nikki Haley did better than Ron DeSantis. They do have more college degree holding voters in them. And that's one data point that might say, okay, Nikki Haley might have an edge or a chance going forward into New Hampshire, where you're going to find more moderate Republicans, you're going to find more college degree holding Republicans. But then I'm going to show you this, which is compared to Iowa, this is from our polling, there's a lot fewer voters in New Hampshire who call themselves part of the MAGA movement. Maybe that's an opportunity for Nikki Haley. The sum of this all is, we were early a few weeks ago to show that Nikki Haley was gaining on Donald Trump, coming closer to him in New Hampshire. Subsequent polling had her gaining a little bit more, even closer. I think the question going forward is, one, what happens with the MAGA base in New Hampshire? Do they underpin Donald Trump's support? And then number two, can Nikki Haley then convince folks like independents, folks like, moderate Republicans, et cetera, to convince them that she is a Trump alternative in New Hampshire?
And the other case she's been making is that she is actually a stronger general election candidate against President Biden. What do the polls tell us about that?
Our polls, I'll just write it right here. Our polls have Nikki Haley +8 over Joe Biden in a national matchup. And that is a larger lead than Donald Trump has. He also has a lead. But what's interesting there, Nancy, is Nikki Haley has seen a rise nationally in perceptions of her electability. She's got relatively more Republicans who think she can beat Joe Biden, but she still really trails Donald Trump on that measure. So maybe they'll read our polls, maybe they'll see that, maybe that'll change, right? We hope so, at least from an information standpoint. But that's going to be key, because once you move away from the MAGA base of Donald Trump, people start making that calculus of, okay, how do they beat Joe Biden? And that maybe could be an opportunity for Nikki Haley. We'll see what kind of argument she makes in the next few days.
Well, they should read our polls if they're smart, because you are the authority. Anthony Salvanto, thanks so much for breaking it all down for us.
Thank you.
And from one authority to another, John Dickerson, who is a CBS News senior political analyst and host of Prime Time with John Dickerson. He joins us now in Washington. Hi, John.
Hello, Nancy. It's so good to see you.
It's great to see you. Thanks for coming down. You have been watching all of this unfold for the past 24 hours. Obviously, Iowa does not have a perfect record of predicting who the ultimate nominee will be, but that doesn't mean that there still isn't a lot to be gleaned from what happened last night. What stands out to you?
Iowa, on the Republican side, has a pretty terrible record of picking the nominee, actually. It's usually a place that either candidacies go to die or they get the false hope of a Ted Cruz or a Mike Huckabee. But I think what's to be gleaned last night is that Donald Trump, there was a period after 2022 when Trump had lost the popular vote and lost the presidency in 2020. Then his candidates didn't do very well in 2022. People were saying, that's it. Finally, the Republican Party's washed their hands of Donald Trump. In that interim period, Republicans learned more about what Donald Trump did to try to overthrow the election. He did more things to make himself objectionable in the kind of traditional way we might think about politics, and yet he won by 30 points. He won across all those demographic groups. He's got endorsements rolling in. And in a way, it is more his party than ever before because of what he has now asked members of Congress who are supporting him to stomach and what they are saying, which is basically, January 6th wasn't as big a deal as we might once have said. If you look at the way people have evolved, Chuck Grassley, 7-term senator from Iowa, said after January 6, 2021, he said, Donald Trump can't be the leader of our party. Well, Grassley was endorsed by Trump in his Senate race and is now, on board. So given where Donald Trump came from, his ability to dominate two other strong candidates, DeSantis and Haley are strong candidates, to dominate them and to also put together an organization. In 2016, Trump had a pretty shambolic presidential campaign, particularly in Iowa. And to be able to do the work you need to do and to execute is also something that's a big deal for a candidate who is a lot of talk, but it was always a question of whether he had an organization behind him.
What's so interesting to me is that you can look at these results in Iowa two ways. You could say this was a landslide for Trump. He won all but one county in Iowa. His next closest competitor was 30 points behind. On the other hand, you could say he won just 51 of the vote. He is, for all intents and purposes, the incumbent on the Republican side. And yet, if President Biden were to win just 51% of the vote in a Democratic primary at this point, the party would be saying that's a disaster.
Yeah. Well, Bush, I think, got 53% in New Hampshire in 1992 against Pat Buchanan, and that was an earthquake, right? So kind of what you're saying. But think about where Donald Trump came from in his reputation after he had lost and then where he is now. Think of the way in which he calls the tune in his party. So he may be king of a small hill, which is to say he may have changed the Republican Party. What we don't know, I still think it's unknown that whether the turnout was low because it was cold, which it certainly was, or whether Donald Trump has created a new party that is older, more male, less college educated,
and smaller,
believes more lies, but is smaller. Yeah. And if that's the case, then it's a big deal, but only in a small way, because it means in a general election context, he won't be able to do well outside of that small group that he's created. That's one of the questions we don't yet have the answer to.
And so now we go to New Hampshire, where the tent does get a little bigger because independents can vote. Is New Hampshire make or break for Ron DeSantis, or for anyone?
I think it is for Haley more than DeSantis. DeSantis Iowa was make or break for DeSantis. I was getting a very Michelle Bachmann feeling with DeSantis. Bachmann put all her chips on Iowa and won the Iowa Ames straw poll, which used to be a big deal, and cratered when in her campaign. Same with Lamar Alexander in 2000, same with Phil Gramm. And DeSantis put a lot of chips on Iowa, and the electorate there should have matched up with him. So he's not going to, New Hampshire's not a state for him. Once we get to South Carolina, if he doesn't participate in New Hampshire, 1,000 things could have changed by then. So I think DeSantis is in a wobbly place. Haley's in a wobbly place in part because she's just not yet taking on Donald Trump. She would like us all to think it's a two-person race. I would also like to think I'm 35 and have more hair than I have. But just because you say it doesn't make it so. However, if she really says it's a two-person race, we know what a two-person race looks like and how she behaves in that, because she treated DeSantis like that in the last debate. And she was very tough, called him a liar, said he was thin-skinned, questioned his temperament, went after him. If it's really a two-person race with Donald Trump, you would think Nikki Haley, who watched him up close, right? She is a character witness. She can say, I saw how he behaved in the White House and he is unfit. I asked her twice this morning on CBS Mornings, do you think he's unfit to be president? She would not say yes. She said some things, I don't think we should have him, but it was a shilly-shallying answer, which she cannot afford, it doesn't seem to me, if it is really a two-person race and if she just lost by 30 points in Iowa and wants to make a big noise in New Hampshire. We saw with Hillary Clinton attacking Barack Obama, with Donald Trump attacking Ted Cruz in 2016. After a candidate loses to somebody in Iowa, they usually come out, really strong. In New Hampshire so far, Nikki Haley hasn't done that. I don't see how she necessarily improves things in the way she needs to without taking on the person she says is the only other person in the race, Donald Trump.
Right. Clearly, she's concerned that if she does, she's going to lose conservative voters.
Exactly. I mean, I'm sorry, I was being slightly naive. Of course, the problem is that when she makes a character attack on Donald Trump, Republican voters see it not as an attack, but as a compliment to him. So that has always been the kind of Chinese finger puzzle for the Republican candidates, which they can't attack the candidate or it gets them in trouble with the voters they need.
Great insights as always. We're looking forward to prime time. John Dickerson, thanks so much.
Thanks, Nancy.
Appreciate it. Coming up next, our political panel joins us to analyze the current state of the GOP field. You're streaming America Decides.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We love music as much as you do. CBS Mornings.
Your morning routine just got better.
I love that.
CBS Mornings.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here? What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
We take you places, teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad. We're going to uplift you.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. I mean, you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
When weather turns extreme.
A massive storm with winds of 150 miles per hour.
The storm strengthened again overnight.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real, you'll have time to get prepared. Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS News.
I wake up every morning asking what's happening in the world, why is this happening, and how do we answer that question? After the tragic loss of beloved newsman Tim Russert, his son went on a worldwide journey to find himself.
I struggled with his grief for a long time.
How Luke Russert is honoring the legacy of his father when we go person to person.
I want to see a Republican nominee that can beat Joe Biden, and I believe that she's the strongest nominee in November. She hasn't been the strongest one in the Republican base primary. I mean, Trump has been the strongest one, but Trump's the weakest one in November.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, who has endorsed Nikki Haley, saying she has the best shot to defeat President Biden in November. This, as recent CBS News polling finds that she actually fares best against Biden among the Republican contenders. The poll has her with a 53-45 advantage over President Biden. We're going to talk about all of this now with Leslie Sanchez and Jonathan Cott. Leslie is a CBS News political analyst who served in the George W. Bush administration. And Jonathan is a former senior advisor to Senators Joe Manchin and Chris Coons. He now serves as a partner at Capitol Counsel. Welcome to both of you.
Yes.
So, Leslie, how well do both Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis have to do in New Hampshire to prove to Republican voters going forward that they have a shot at the Republican nomination?
The challenge for them is I think a lot of voters already made up their mind, right? You're talking about increasingly a smaller percent of the majority of the party. And these are people frustrated with Trump, the independents, the Democrats kind of lean conservative. But the hardliners and the conservative lane of the party feel strongly about Trump, not necessarily for the same reasons they did in 2016 and 2020, but this is not a vacuum. Looking in a contest of where the economy is today and where Biden is today, they want the rough and tumble of someone like Trump. So Nikki Haley has to show she has that tough tenacity to take on a national level, and a lot of people feel she's tough, but not where they want it to be.
Nikki Haley is making this electability argument, which makes sense. You look at the polls, she definitely does better in a general election matchup right now against President Biden than Donald Trump does. But it's tricky to make that argument in a primary, isn't it? Because basically what you're saying to those conservative voters is, hey, I'm more moderate, and that's why I do better in a general election matchup. And that's not necessarily what they're hungering for.
If you really listen to and spend a lot of time in the focus groups talking what people are hungry for, they want a change. And this is coming from Democrats who feel that the party has gotten weak. I mean, the president's weak, the policies are weak, and Donald Trump is consistently pressed on that issue. And while we're sitting here rumbling through the primary, in many ways, there's another national campaign that's going on, and that's where voters are. So I don't think it's a fair comparison to say now that that's where the general election would be. I think it's a lot more competitive than what those polls would tell you right now.
Jonathan, as the Republicans suck up all the oxygen, the president and the Biden campaign writ large are laying very low. Not hearing much from them. They had almost no reaction to the caucus results last night. This is an intentional strategy, but explain what the strategy is, because it makes a lot of Democrats nervous. They want to see the president out there attacking Donald Trump.
Well, I don't think the president needs to be out there attacking Donald Trump. I think what the DNC and the campaign are doing is letting Republicans control the airwaves. The entire Republican Party is a MAGA Trump party. If Nikki Haley's going to win, she has to win over MAGA voters. She's going to have to go so far right that that 53% will not exist in the general election. She's at 53% because people think she's moderate and people think she has different views. If she's going to be the nominee, she has to win those 50% of Trump voters, and you only get that way by being Trump. So I think the DNC and the Biden campaign are just letting the extreme Republican views dominate the airwaves, and they'll get him out there touting all of his accomplishments, all of the bills he's passed. He'll be at ribbon cuttings everywhere over the next 9 months, and Republicans will be seeing who can go farther to the right. Let's not forget, Nikki Haley was just dealing with, was slavery the cause of the Civil War a week and a half ago? Like, the DNC is happy to let Republicans step all over themselves in these fights.
They may have gotten another soundbite from her today for a future ad when she said that the United States has never been a racist country. What do the results in Iowa mean for your former boss, Senator Joe Manchin? Do the results make him more or less likely, do you think, to jump in and launch a third-party bid?
The results in Iowa have no impact on him. 100,000 people came out in a state that is redder than Texas and whiter than Utah to pick Donald Trump. That has no impact on him. He's focused on giving a voice to the moderate majority. While you saw 100,000 people in Iowa vote, there's about 200, 300,000 independents in New Hampshire who don't have a voice, who haven't gone to a party side because they think that the middle is where the country needs to be. Those are the people he's focused on, and that's the people he was talking to last week in New Hampshire.
One of the things I thought was so interesting from the entrance polls last night was the fact that immigration for these Republican caucus voters ranked almost as high as the economy when they were asked, what is your number one issue? Does this indicate that immigration is the animating, or one of the biggest animating issues for Republicans this year, in the same way that our polls have showed abortion is an animating issue for Democrats?
I think that's a great way to characterize it. And I wouldn't say it's immigration. I would say it's border security and how it aligns with safety. That's a detonation issue, is politically what we would call it. It's an issue that ignites in certain communities and galvanizes maybe a lot of floating voters who don't traditionally turn out for elections, who really feel, and we saw national security mobs, right? We saw them in 2004. We've seen different types of suburbans, outer suburbs, rural areas that respond to certain types of issues. And if we look at the map of who's responding, it really is more of those rural and ex-urban areas as opposed to urban cities. So that immigration issue, whether we call it that or border security, is going to continue to be what Republicans are talking about, along with a weaker economy.
I think that's going to be an issue for Democrats as well, which is why I think they're fighting so hard to get a deal in the Senate, and that the White House is trying to get a deal done on this because they know it's a big issue. They know it's going to be a deciding factor for a lot of voters, not just Republican voters.
No question. Jonathan Cott, Leslie Sanchez, thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. Ron DeSantis is back on the campaign trail after his second-place finish in Iowa, hitting South Carolina and New Hampshire today. He's already had some strong words for Nikki Haley, but not so much for the former president. We're going to ask our campaign reporter traveling with DeSantis if we can expect that strategy to change. That's next. You're streaming America Decides. We'll be right back.
about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app. Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Since childhood, she never stopped reaching for the skies. Now she's spent more time in space than any other American.
I like being a part of something bigger than me.
Peggy Whitson's extraordinary career as a history-making astronaut when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
I always tell people that Twitter would not be Twitter without Black Twitter. It's just us being in fellowship with each other.
And it becomes a conversation you don't want to be left out of.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter.
Based on that one tweet, the hashtag #OscarSoWhite was trending around the world.
If anything has really powered Black Twitter, it's been humor.
If your food ain't right, oh, we're gonna tell you about that too.
We tend to create change, create culture and cool.
That's how movements happen on Black Twitter and go beyond more than that.
Black Twitter, the Twitterverse that changed a generation. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Our story's just begun.
Why did you want to share your story?
Water up this high?
Where are these coming from?
That's the million-dollar question.
I'm a very curious person. I wake up every morning asking, what's happening in the world? Why is this happening? And how do we answer that question on the CBS Evening News?
Welcome back to America Decides. Just a day after finishing second in the Iowa caucuses, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is back on the trail. His first stop this morning, though, was in South Carolina, not New Hampshire. And there, he didn't attack the man who beat him, former President Trump. Instead, he went after Nikki Haley in her home state.
Her own campaign said top two finishers in Iowa punched the ticket. They were telling everyone they would be one of the two, and they were not. Look, she was governor here for 6 years. Can you name major achievements under her tenure? I mean, tell me if there are, because she hasn't been able to do it.
Wow. CBS News political reporter Aaron Navarro joins us now from snowy New Hampshire. Hi, Aaron. Okay, so explain this to us. Why is Governor DeSantis choosing to go after Nikki Haley, who he beat last night by 2 points, but he did beat her, instead of going after former President Trump, who won the Iowa caucuses?
Nancy, good to be with you. Well, it's an acknowledgement of where Nikki Haley's position is in New Hampshire, in South Carolina, especially in New Hampshire, where she leads Florida Governor Ron DeSantis by almost 20 points, depending on the poll that you look at. So trying to cut into her lead has been a priority for DeSantis ever since, last night. And during a gaggle of reporters in South Carolina, he straight out said that he doesn't believe Nikki Haley will win New Hampshire. Again, trying to put the pressure on her, especially after Iowa, to do well in these next two states, especially in South Carolina, where DeSantis and his campaign believe that if Nikki Haley doesn't win her home state, that they, in their words, that they think she should drop out at that point. Of course, she's made no indication she would do anything like that.
He came in second place in Iowa, and of course, second place sounds good in theory, but DeSantis still lost Iowa by 30 points after visiting all 99 counties in Iowa. He engaged in that retail politics that Iowa's famous for, and he still lost. At this point, Aaron, does he have the time and the money to make up ground in New Hampshire and South Carolina?
Well, yeah, the question there is money. Or voters or donors still going to be motivated enough to believe the DeSantis campaign argument that he is a viable challenger to former President Trump when he cleared 50%, which from talking to DeSantis bundlers and donors going into Monday was a concern of theirs, that one, Trump would clear 50%, and two, that Nikki Haley would be within striking distance of DeSantis. And while DeSantis got second place, Haley was tailing him right behind him with just 2 points. So regardless, the governor has indicated that he is going to play in both South Carolina and New Hampshire. It was in South Carolina this morning, indicated that he may be favoring the state a little bit more. It's a bit more evangelical, a bit more conservative, kind of in the mold of his style of republicanism. And he's in New Hampshire tonight for a town hall.
Aaron, one of the things that's nice when you're a challenger, when you're trailing, is to participate in a big debate and get a lot of attention. But now it looks like DeSantis is not going to get that opportunity because Nikki Haley said she wouldn't debate in New Hampshire unless Donald Trump debated too. And so now we've learned that the ABC debate is canceled. Have you gotten any reaction from the DeSantis team about this? Are they disappointed?
Well, they were really hoping to get Haley on that stage, and they were pressuring her to get on. But if you look at the polling, DeSantis is just now where Haley is. And it kind of is indicative of the challenge facing DeSantis here in New Hampshire, a state that he has not invested nearly as much time as he did in Iowa, and where the electorate is not really necessarily in line with DeSantis's Republican base and, pitch.
Right. And he also benefited to some degree in Iowa by the support of the state's governor, Kim Reynolds, and in a way, Nikki Haley has a similar benefit in New Hampshire, where she has been stumping throughout the state with the popular Governor Chris Sununu. So we'll see whether that endorsement is as helpful to her or even more helpful and helps her to nab her first victory in New Hampshire. Aaron Navarro, thanks so much for joining us from a very cold and snowy New Hampshire. Well, that does it for us today. Thanks so much for watching. We're going to be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News. Have a good one.
The grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes